Welcome to the mythical creatures.
In contemporary interpretations, vampires were once human but underwent a transformation after being bitten by another vampire. This new existence implied that, while still maintaining their human appearance, they were not entirely living beings. Vampires were typically immortal, exceptionally alluring, and utilized their charisma to allure their chosen prey. Methods of destroying a vampire included decapitation, impalement with an aspen stake through the heart, a silver bullet, exposure to fire, sunlight, or holy water. Some ancient beliefs held that vampires had an aversion to garlic. Additionally, in certain myths, these entities possessed the ability to shapeshift into animals such as bats or wolves. The exact origins of the first vampire tales remain unclear. References to vampires have been documented in ancient Babylonian and Assyrian texts, dating back approximately 4,000 years. Within Mesopotamian legends, there exists a figure known as the malevolent female demon, occasionally depicted with a lion's head, who would clandestinely enter homes at night to abduct children. She was also associated with spreading diseases and was believed to feed on the blood of young men, as well as inducing nightmares. In Jewish lore, a similar entity is named Lilith, Adam's initial wife prior to Eva. Subsequently, after leaving her husband, transformed into a monstrous being that abducted infants and taunted sleeping husbands, refusing divine command to return to Eden. Lilith roamed the world birthing offspring, although angels pledged to slay her children, leading Lilith to vow vengeance upon humanity and their descendants. Ancient Greek mythology included Lamia, a demoness with the torso of a woman and the lower body of a snake. According to legend, Lamia was once the wife of Zeus but was cursed by Hera due to jealousy, resulting in madness that drove her to kill and consume her own children. Subsequently, Lamia metamorphosed into a malevolent creature who preyed upon infants. In ancient Hindu beliefs, there was the Vatala, a feared entity capable of resurrecting the recently deceased. Myths surrounding such beings proliferated globally with the expansion of trade and conquest. Virtually every culture harbored tales of sinister demons abducting children, drinking blood, and reviving the dead. Russian folklore featured ghouls, reanimated corpses that emerged from graves at night to torment the living. According to Slavic beliefs, those who failed to find peace after death became ghouls, thus threatening the unbaptized or excommunicated. Vampire hysteria reached its peak in 17th and 18th century Europe. Reports surfaced of individuals citing their deceased relatives mingling among the living. Authorities responded to these obsessions by issuing orders to exhume graves and incinerate corpses or impale them with stakes. Vampire frenzy permeated artistic expression, with these creatures becoming subjects of poetry and paintings. Toward the end of the 19th century, the vampire archetype gained specificity through Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, featuring a protagonist inspired by Prince Latip's. Renowned for his cruelty, Stoker transformed the vampire from a demonic entity into an astute character resistant to destruction. Another influence on artistic endeavors was Countess Bathory, reputedly bathing in the blood of young girls to maintain her youth and beauty. In modern portrayals, vampires have acquired romantic attributes, exemplified by the immensely popular Twilight saga. The protagonist, Edward Cullen, possesses refined beauty, sparkling skin, and a compassionate heart. The vampire archetype has evolved over time, transitioning from simple bloodthirsty demons driven by vengeance and malice to beings closely resembling humans who learn to manage their instincts. Lewis, the central figure in Interview with a Vampire, exemplifies this modern interpretation, striving to transcend his primal inclinations while maintaining his humanity, engaging in introspection and empathy. Although scientific evidence supporting the existence of vampires is absent, there exists a condition that parallels some vampiric symptoms. Porphyria, a rare genetic blood disorder. Afflicted individuals experience toxicity due to impaired hemoglobin synthesis, manifesting symptoms akin to those associated with vampirism. Porphyria predominantly affects nobility, often as a consequence of incestuous unions. Catalepsy, another phenomenon associated with vampirism, induces a death-like state characterized by muscle atrophy and deep slumber, potentially leading to post-mortem manifestations. These diseases, while rare, provide plausible explanations for historical vampire myths. Yet the prevalence of such beliefs can also be attributed to the human fascination with death and the unknown. In various mythological systems, there is an image of a werewolf, a monster that represents a person capable of turning into an animal, or vice versa, as well as an animal with the ability to turn into a human. This ability is often inherent in demons, deities, and spirits. The role of a classic werewolf is most often played by a wolf, with whom all associations that arise at the mention of this term are associated. Such a change can occur at the request of a werewolf or accidentally. For example, under the influence of certain lunar cycles or sounds such as howling, werewolves are immune to the aging process and physical ailments due to the constant renewal of tissues, which makes them almost immortal. They can't be destroyed by inflicting fatal wounds to the heart or brain, or in other ways that damage these organs, for example, by hanging or strangulation. It is believed that silver is also deadly to werewolves, although in fact, a werewolf is a wolf. Being in wolf form, he still retains human abilities and knowledge that help him in hunting. Skills such as choosing certain victims, bypassing traps, and human cunning become apparent when investigating cases involving werewolves. A person who turns into a werewolf against his will, whether born, cursed, or bitten, is not considered definitively cursed until he experiences human blood. Once that happens, his soul will be forever cursed, and nothing will be able to heal it. But even if after that he refrains from trying to drink human blood, his soul will not be able to go to heaven, and he will remain on earth until his death under the burden of a curse. Werewolves are most often depicted as monsters. For example, the Greeks present them as a skinny sorcerer with the head of a donkey and the tail of a monkey. It is believed that on gloomy winter nights, especially from Christmas to Epiphany, werewolves roam everywhere, scaring people. However, after the water consecration, the air is cleared of these monsters and they instantly disappear. Since ancient times, the insidious predator has been a symbol of night and winter, as well as death. For example, the Egyptian god with the head of a wolf accompanied the dead to the realm of the dead. Nevertheless, our distant ancestors observed some mysterious features in the wolf that associated it with the sun. Could it have been agility, indefatigability, the ability to bowl after prey, or his power and ferocity? All this was enough for him to become a symbol of the sun. In ancient times, many animals played the role of totems. Hunters and warriors were not so devotedly and fervently transferred to any other predator as to the wolf. Their ferocity, endurance, and luck in hunting amazed the primitive consciousness. Such devotion could not remain without consequences. Herodotus described the history of a northern European tribe whose members turned into wolves every year for a short time. Many tribes in different parts of Europe suffered from such megalomania. For example, the Bots had warriors, servants of the wolf god, who took drugs before the battle and literally transformed into wolves. During battles, such warriors saw themselves in the form of wolves in their hallucinations. Some of them remained in this state forever, and then they were killed so that they would not harm the herds. According to legend, the German wolf warriors were so ferocious that they did not need to use weapons. They could kill enemies with their shields. The sagas also tell of bloodthirsty robbers who also considered themselves wolves. Despite this, people believed that their heroic ancestors, when they died, turned into wolves, and the gods of the Scandinavians and Germans, such as Odin and Wotan, themselves were like werewolf warriors. In mythology, the end of the world was depicted as the coming of Fenrir, the universal wolf, who would open his mouth from earth to heaven and devour everything and everyone, including Odin himself. The first mass hysteria associated with the identification and persecution of werewolves, including werewolves of dogs and cats, swept Europe in the XIV century. 2 centuries later, this phenomenon reached a new peak. The last mass outbreak, which lasted in France from 1570 to 1610, was accompanied by an intense theoretical discussion. At that time, peasants stabbed all suspicious passers-by with stakes, and the courts sentenced those possessed by lycanthropy to be burned along with the innocently accused. At the same time, scientists wrote treatises, master's theses, and pamphlets on the topic of werewolf. The most famous case was the trial of Jules Garnier in the 16th century, which horrified the inhabitants of northern French villages. According to witnesses of that time, this tramp met the devil in the forest, made a deal with him, selling him his soul, and in exchange received a drug that allowed him to turn into a wolf. Regardless of how it happened, Garnier did commit terrible crimes. He raped women, killed children, practiced cannibalism, and mutilated the bodies of the men he killed. He was arrested, interrogated, and tortured in Dolly 1574. The evidence of the interrogation still reads like a fascinating detective novel. Few such records have survived, and only a few cases of lycanthropy have been documented out of thousands of others. Psychosis often acted as an excuse during periods of extreme hunger. It allowed people to either attribute cannibalism to werewolves or hide behind insanity to avoid guilt before God when despair led to such terrible deeds. The werewolf, as a creature from mythology, will remain relevant for a long time. Perhaps, for the time being, human society retains its complexity and surprise. Only when human self-hatred is finally recognized as an illusion that we have been mistaken for reality for many centuries, and distrust becomes an archaic remnant, the fantastic image of the non-human will lose its relevance. The confrontation between vampires and werewolves is an epic conflict that permeates many literary works, films, and other art forms, enriching them with exciting plots and deep themes. Vampires, these eternal creatures of the night, are often depicted as possessing intelligence and charisma, who manipulate their victims by feeding on their blood. They symbolize the dark sides of human nature, which lead to power and the thirst for immortality. Vampires in literature and cinema are often associated with an aristocracy, the elite, and the hidden threat that lurks in the shadows. Werewolves, on the contrary, represent a force of nature and instincts. Their transformation into a merciless predator symbolizes the inner struggles of the human soul, the struggle between light and darkness, reason and animal instincts. Werewolves are often associated with wildness, freedom, and the power of nature, but their curse also carries the weight of responsibility and loss. The conflict between vampires and werewolves often stems from their different goals and desires. Vampires strive for power, control, and preservation of their existence at the expense of others, while werewolves fight for freedom, self-determination, and survival in harmony with nature. Their clashes can be both massive battles for territory and influence, as well as personal confrontations based on revenge, love, or betrayal. However, in addition to physical battles, the confrontation between vampires and werewolves often reflects the internal struggles of human characters. They are faced with a choice between their own instincts and moral principles, between lust for power and love, between darkness and light. This internal conflict gives depth to the stories and allows viewers and readers to better understand human nature. In conclusion, the confrontation between vampires and werewolves not only provides exciting plots and epic battles, but also serves as a symbol of the eternal struggle within ourselves, the struggle between light and darkness, between reason and instincts, between the thirst for power and the desire for freedom.
Thanks for watching. It will be nice to see you again in the world of mythical creatures.